The night stretched wide and still, a vast expanse of quiet, broken only by the occasional rustle of the wind over the sands. The sky was a velvet canopy of black, scattered with stars that blinked and twinkled like ancient eyes watching over the earth. It was the kind of night that felt eternal, where time seemed to hold its breath. It is the kind of night when something extraordinary might happen. Far to the east, the horizon carried the faint glow of distant mountains. Below the heavens, a small group of wise men sat in a circle, their figures silhouetted against the soft light of an oil lamp. They were scholars, seekers of knowledge, their lives devoted to understanding the mysteries of the skies. On most nights, their instruments, a simple arrangement of astrolabes, scrolls, and rudimentary lenses, served as their tools for untangling the celestial patterns that governed the universe. But tonight was different. One of them, a man with deep-set eyes and a beard streaked with gray, adjusted his gaze toward the heavens. His hand hovered over the table as though frozen mid-thought. "Look," he murmured, his voice low but urgently charged. His companions followed his gaze, their heads tilting upward as their eyes scanned the firmament. At first, it seemed as though the stars were unchanged, silent, serene, unremarkable in their distant beauty. But then, as their eyes adjusted, they saw it. A single star, brighter than the rest, pulsing with a brilliance that defied the cold indifference of the others. It hung in the sky as though it had been placed there deliberately, its light casting faint shadows over the desert sands. The youngest among them, barely more than a boy, spoke first. "It wasn't there before," he whispered, awe flickering in his voice. "It wasn't," the elder confirmed, his tone more measured, but no less enthralled. He reached for a scroll, unrolling it with careful hands. The ancient text crackled softly in the quiet night. "A star such as this. It is no accident," he said, his eyes scanning the faded ink. "It is a sign." The group exchanged glances, their breaths shallow. Signs in the heavens were not to be dismissed lightly. For generations they had studied the prophecies of old, words that spoke of a king, a savior, a light that would break through the darkness. And now, here it was, shining above them. "What does it mean?" the boy asked, his voice trembling slightly. "It means," the elder said, his voice firm, "that something greater than us all has begun, and we must not look away." The group sat in silence, the weight of realization settling over them. Above, the star continued to shine, unyielding in its brilliance, as though it knew it was meant to be seen. The brilliance of the star was unlike anything the wise men had ever encountered. It was not just the brightness, but the way it seemed to command attention, pulling their gazes upward, as if whispering a secret meant only for those who dared to seek it. Its light was steady, unwavering, as though it carried a purpose that transcended the ordinary night sky. The elder of the group, his hands trembling slightly, unrolled an ancient scroll that had been preserved through generations. The parchment, yellowed with time, bore inscriptions that spoke of prophecies, tales of a king who would bring salvation, of a light that would shine in the darkness. His voice, steady and deliberate, broke the silence. "This star is no mere celestial event. It is a sign, a promise fulfilled." The youngest among them leaned closer, his eyes wide with wonder. "A promise?" he echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. "What does it mean?" The elder paused, his gaze fixed on the glowing star. "It means," he said, his tone solemn, "that the prophecies are true. A great king has been born. This light is his announcement, his calling card to the world." The group fell into a contemplative silence, the weight of the moment pressing heavily upon them. The star's light seemed to pulse, as though urging them to act. One of the men finally spoke, his voice firm and resolute. "We must go," he said. "If this star is his sign, then we are called to follow it." The elder nodded, a faint smile crossing his lips. "Yes," he agreed, "but we must prepare. This journey will not be simple, yet for such a sign no distance is too great." The star continued to shine, a silent beacon in the heavens, as the men began their preparations, knowing that they were about to embark on a journey that would change their lives and perhaps the world forever. The wise men stood gathered beneath the vast expanse of the heavens, their instruments spread out on a low wooden table. The tools, simple lenses, astrolabes, and maps of constellations, reflected the pale light of the mysterious star. Each man worked with quiet urgency, their movements deliberate, as they measured, observed, and sketched the position of the celestial anomaly. "This is no ordinary star," said one, a man with sharp features and a voice edged with excitement. His hand hovered over a parchment where he had just finished a detailed drawing. "Its path doesn't align with any known patterns. It's as if it appeared out of nowhere." Another, older and more reserved, nodded thoughtfully. "I've read about such things in the ancient texts," he murmured, tracing his finger along a weathered scroll. "They spoke of a light that would herald the birth of a king, a ruler destined to bring peace." The youngest of the group, barely more than a boy, looked up from his calculations, his eyes wide with wonder. "Do you believe it's true?" he asked hesitantly. "Could this really mean him?" The elder placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, his gaze steady. "The heavens don't lie," he said firmly. "This star is a message written in light, meant to guide those who seek the truth." The group fell silent, the weight of the realization settling over them like the stillness of the desert night. The star's radiance seemed to grow as they watched, its light cutting through the darkness with a clarity that felt almost divine. One of the men broke the silence. "If this is truly a sign of the king's birth, we cannot ignore it," he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. "We must follow it wherever it leads." The elder nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Indeed," he agreed. "But first we must prepare. Such a journey will require faith, and we must gather more than provisions. We must gather our resolve." The star continued to shine, a silent witness to their growing conviction, as the wise men began to lay the groundwork for what would become an extraordinary journey. The room was dimly lit, the soft glow of an oil lamp illuminating the ancient scrolls spread across the table. The wise men leaned in close, their eyes scanning the faded script as they pieced together the meaning behind the star that now dominated their thoughts. The air was thick with anticipation, their breath shallow as though the very act of reading might disturb the sacred words. "This passage," one of them said, his finger tracing the delicate script, "it speaks of a ruler born under a great light, a king who will lead his people not through conquest but through peace." His voice trembled slightly, the weight of the words heavy in the quiet room. Another nodded, his expression a mixture of awe and conviction. "Isaiah's prophecies," he murmured. "A child born unto us, a savior, and this star. It matches the description perfectly. It is not just a celestial event, it's a message from the heavens." The youngest among them hesitated before speaking, his voice soft but steady. "But how can we be sure?" he asked. "What if we are mistaken?" The elder of the group turned to him, his gaze steady and filled with a quiet authority. "Faith," he said simply. "The stars have guided humanity for generations, and now they guide us to something far greater. This star is unlike anything we have ever seen. It shines not for itself, but for the one it heralds." The room fell silent as the men exchanged glances, their faces reflecting the flickering light of the lamp. Each of them felt the same pull, an undeniable urge to act. The elder spoke again, his voice firm. "We cannot ignore this. The scriptures are clear, and the heavens are speaking. We must follow." The youngest nodded, his doubts giving way to determination. "Then we must prepare," he said. "The journey will be long, but if this star truly marks the arrival of a king, it is a journey worth taking." Outside, the star continued to shine, its light steady and resolute, as though it waited for the men to set their course. Inside, the wise men began to plan, their hearts filled with a mixture of reverence and resolve, knowing that they stood on the cusp of a moment that would echo through eternity. The chamber was filled with a hushed energy, a sense of solemnity mingling with purpose. The wise men gathered around a low wooden table, their faces illuminated by the warm glow of flickering lamps. Before them lay an array of precious items, each gleaming softly in the light, awaiting careful selection. The air carried the faint scent of frankincense, mingling with the earthy aroma of myrrh and the metallic tang of gold. One of the wise men, a broad-shouldered figure with a quiet intensity, picked up a small golden vessel. Its surface shimmered with intricate designs, each pattern etched with deliberate care. "Gold," he said, his voice measured, "for the King of Kings. It is fitting for royalty." Another nodded, his hands hovering over a jar of fine frankincense. "And this," he said, his tone reverent, "for a priest, one who will intercede between heaven and earth. Its fragrance will rise like prayers to the heavens." The youngest among them, his brow furrowed in thought, reached for a small vial of myrrh. "And this?" he asked, his voice tentative. "For what purpose does myrrh serve?" The elder of the group stepped forward, his expression somber. "Myrrh," he said softly, "is for sacrifice. It is a symbol of suffering, of the price that must be paid." He placed his hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "A gift for the one who will bear the weight of the world's redemption." The room fell silent, the significance of their choices settling heavily upon them. Each item was more than a gift. It was a testament to the roles foretold in ancient prophecies: a king, a priest, and a savior. They exchanged glances, a shared understanding passing among them without the need for words. One of the men spoke, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "These gifts are not just treasures, they are declarations of faith, of who he is and what he will become." The others nodded, their resolve firm. They wrapped each item with care, their hands moving with deliberate precision, as though performing a sacred act. The gold, the frankincense, and the myrrh, each piece became not just an offering, but a prayer, a hope, and a promise. As they finished, the elder straightened, his eyes lifting to the heavens visible through the window. The stars shone brightly, its light spilling into the room as if blessing their preparations. "Let us prepare ourselves," he said. "The journey is long, but the purpose is eternal." The men gathered their chosen gifts, their hearts steady with the knowledge that they were carrying more than mere offerings. They carried symbols of a destiny that would forever change the world. The chamber was quiet, save the soft rustle of robes as the wise men knelt together in a circle. The flickering light of the oil lamps cast their shadows long and wavering against the stone walls, creating an atmosphere of solemn reverence. Before them, the gifts they had chosen, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, were carefully laid out, their significance weighing heavily on their minds. The elder of the group, his hands clasped tightly before him, began to speak. His voice was steady, but it carried the weight of years of study, faith, and expectation. "Lord of the heavens," he intoned, his gaze lifting slightly toward the faint glow of the star visible through the high window. "We come before you as seekers of truth, guided by the light you have set before us." The others bowed their heads deeper, their hands pressing into the cool stone floor. The youngest of them, his voice soft but earnest, added, "We do not know the fullness of your plan, but we trust in the star you have sent. Guide us on this journey and give us strength to follow wherever it leads." The elder nodded approvingly, his eyes glimmering with a quiet pride. "We ask not for ease," he continued, "but for faith. Faith to carry these gifts not as mere offerings, but as symbols of the King, the priest, and the Savior who has been born unto this world." Each man remained silent for a moment, their thoughts turned inward. The room seemed to hold its breath, the stillness broken only by the faint crackle of the lamps. It was as if the very air had been imbued with a sacred presence, a quiet affirmation that their prayers were heard. One by one, they rose, their movements deliberate and filled with resolve. The elder stepped forward, his hands extended over the gifts. "These are not just treasures," he said, his voice firm. "They are declarations of faith, and with them, we honor the one who has come to redeem the world." The youngest among them looked toward the star, its light streaming into the chamber like a quiet blessing. "May it guide us," he murmured, "as surely as it guides all who seek him." The elder placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, his expression both stern and kind. "It will," he said with certainty. "For the light we follow is not just in the sky, it burns within us as well." With their prayers offered and their hearts strengthened, the wise men gathered their gifts and stepped out into the night. The star's radiance greeted them, steady and unwavering, as if it had been waiting for this moment to lead them forward. The dawn broke quietly over the eastern horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of gold and lavender. The star, bright and unwavering, still hung in the heavens, a beacon guiding the wise men toward their destination. Around them, the desert stirred awake, the cool night air giving way to the promise of the day's heat. The camels, their silhouettes tall and patient, stood ready, their burdens carefully secured with the gifts meant for the newborn king. The elder of the group, his face marked with lines of wisdom and resolve, stepped forward and raised his hand. "Today we follow," he said, his voice steady, carrying the weight of conviction. "The star will lead us, and we will not turn back until we reach the one it reveals." The youngest of the wise men adjusted his cloak, his movements quick and precise. He glanced toward the star, his heart a mixture of anticipation and nervous energy. "Do you think we'll see him soon?" he asked softly, more to himself than to anyone else. The elder turned, his gaze meeting the boy's. "The journey will not be short," he replied, "but each step brings us closer. Trust the star. It shines for a purpose, and that purpose will guide us." The caravan began to move, the rhythmic sound of camel hooves breaking the stillness of the morning. The wise men rode in silence, their thoughts carried forward by the light of the star. The sands stretched endlessly before them, a sea of gold under the growing sun. Though the path was uncertain, their purpose was clear. One of the men, a scholar with a sharp mind and a quiet demeanor, spoke up as they crested a low hill. "The prophecy spoke of a king," he said, his voice calm but filled with wonder. "But no prophecy could describe the way this journey feels, as though we are part of something far greater than ourselves." The elder nodded, his eyes never leaving the horizon. "We are," he said simply, "and that is why we must move forward, no matter what lies ahead." As the day wore on, the star remained visible, its light unwavering even under the brightness of the sun. It was as if the heavens themselves were ensuring their path remained clear. The wise men pressed on, their hearts steady with faith and their eyes fixed on the light that promised to change everything. The desert stretched endlessly before them, its golden sands shimmering under the merciless heat of the midday sun. The once crisp morning air had thickened, pressing down like a heavy blanket. The wise men pressed on, their faces drawn with determination, their camels plodding steadily under the weight of their burdens. The star, still visible even in the daylight, seemed to beckon them forward, a constant reminder of the purpose that drove them. A sudden gust of wind whipped through the caravan, stirring the sand into a swirling haze. The youngest of the wise men shielded his face with his cloak, his eyes watering as the grains bit at his skin. "How much farther?" he called out, his voice strained against the howl of the wind. The elder turned, his expression calm despite the harsh conditions. "Farther still," he replied, his voice steady. "But we must not lose heart. The star has not wavered, and neither must we." The wind died down as quickly as it had risen, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The men paused to catch their breath, their camels shifting restlessly beneath them. One of the scholars spoke, his voice low but resolute. "This journey is not meant to be easy," he said. "Anything worth seeking comes at a cost." The group nodded in agreement, their resolve hardening. They pressed onward, the rhythm of the camels' hooves a steady counterpoint to the challenges they faced. The sun climbed higher, its heat relentless, but the star remained their guide, its light cutting through the adversity like a blade through the darkness. As night fell, the cool air brought relief, but the weariness of the day lingered in their bones. They set up a small camp, the soft glow of a fire flickering against the dark sky. The youngest man looked up at the star, his expression thoughtful. "It hasn't moved," he said quietly. "It's as if it's waiting for us." The elder placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, his gaze fixed on the light above. "It is," he said, "and we will reach it. No storm, no heat, no distance can stop us, for what lies ahead is greater than any hardship we face." The fire crackled softly, its warmth a small comfort against the vastness of the desert night. The men rested briefly, their hearts bolstered by the unshakable presence of the star. When dawn came, they would rise again, their eyes fixed on the horizon, and their spirits unwavering in the face of whatever lay ahead. The fire crackled softly, its glow casting long shadows across the weathered face of the old shepherd. He sat on a smooth stone near the edge of the camp, his gaze fixed upward at the star that seemed to outshine all others. Its light was steady, a stark contrast to the flickering flames before him. The other shepherds sat nearby, their faces reflecting the same quiet awe as they too followed his gaze. "Sarza," said the old shepherd began, his voice low and gravelly. "It isn't just a light in the sky, it's a promise, a guide for those willing to follow." He paused, letting his words settle into the stillness of the night. One of the younger shepherds, no more than a boy, leaned forward, his wide eyes searching the elder's face. "But why now?" he asked softly. "What does it mean?" The old man's lips curved into a faint smile, his eyes glimmering with a mix of wonder and certainty. "It means," he said, "that the silence is over. The star shines because something greater than us all has come into the world." The group fell silent again, the weight of his words hanging in the cool air. The youngest shepherd, his voice barely above a whisper, ventured another question. "Do you think those who follow it will find what they're looking for?" The elder's gaze never left the star. "They will," he said firmly, "but finding isn't the end, it's the beginning. That light isn't just for them, it's for us all. A sign that no matter how long the night, the dawn always comes." The boy looked back at the fire, his expression thoughtful. The other shepherds shifted slightly, each lost in their own reflections. The old man continued, his voice soft but resonant. "The star calls to those who seek. It calls to the wise, the faithful, the broken. And it calls to us. We may not follow its path with our feet, but we follow with our hearts." The fire crackled louder for a moment, sending a cascade of sparks into the air. The shepherds watched as the sparks rose, their light fading against the brilliance of the star above. The old man leaned back, his hands resting on his knees. "Keep watching," he said, his voice almost a whisper now. "That light will lead to something far greater than we can imagine, and when it does, the world will never be the same." The shepherds nodded silently, their eyes once again turning skyward. Above them, the star burned bright and unwavering, a quiet testament to the promise it carried.